Hello everybody. Today is another edition of Kittens and Keeps. And today I would like to start talking, and I mean the emphasis is on start talking, about the One Ring role-playing game. Why am I going to start talking about it? Because there is a lot to say about this game. And I haven't played it. And I don't think I ever will, which is what makes this whole overview very bittersweet, because I believe that this is maybe not from a mechanical point of view, but definitely from a content point of view, probably one of the best role-playing games out there. Now, it is based on the novels by J.R.R. Tolkien, and of course, whenever we talk about somebody implementing something with regard to a game, or at the moment also films and series and whatnot, based on the writings of J.R.R. Tolkien, it will always just be, at least at this moment in time, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and its appendices. The Silmarillion, as we know, is not licensed at all. You can't really do anything with it. I don't think this will change, at least not as long as Christopher Tolkien is alive. Maybe his heirs will change their approach, or his approach, but anything that you will find in the official publications is not based on anything but The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings and its appendices. Now, there have been different, approaches to turning Tolkien's works into a role-playing game. There is, of course, the Middle-earth role-playing game by ICE, which is the same company, incidentally, that made the Middle-earth CCG. And I don't think that this is still published. I'm not sure. I actually didn't investigate. I'm not quite sure. But of course, the One Ring is still being published. It's fairly recent. It was, I think, first released in 2000 and let's see if it says when this was released. 2014 is the copyright. And it was written by Francesco Nepitello. And I understand that he's also the person who devised the board game, The War of the Ring, which actually shines through in some aspects of the game. Now, when we talk about role-playing games, of course, what we talk about is people taking on the roles of usually some form of heroic entity. You know, it can be a vampire, it can be a werewolf, it can be a changeling, it can be a magic user, it can be an elf from a race point of view, a troll, depending on what you're playing. It can be something set in the future. It can be something that comes from a franchise like Star Wars as a role-playing game by Fantasy Flight Games. You know, these are all things that are possible. And I always like to distinguish between non-franchise, soft franchise, and hard franchise. Non-franchise would be anything like Pathfinder or D&D. D&D created its own world. It created many worlds: Greyhawk, Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, Eberron. You know, these are all different worlds that Ravenloft, of course, that they created. Pathfinder created its world Golarion. Now there's Starfinder, in which Golarion simply doesn't exist anymore. But you're basically, the sky is the limit, and whoever holds the copyright to, let's say, D&D or Pathfinder could come up with whatever world they would like. Or it's very easy for fans to just take the system and maybe even take Golarion and come up with their own stories. Then we have what I would call soft franchise, let's say The Dark Eye, which doesn't have a literary or film background. There is no film called The Dark Eye, or no books that this is based on. But the franchise holder, the creators of The Dark Eye, have actually opted to have a very, very strong world building going on, which entails the people playing the games actually going through and shaping the world as they play the games. And this is why it's always very important to understand each adventure that you play in The Dark Eye and how it relates to the world Aventuria that it's based in. Because you can actually take part in world-changing campaigns which are released, and depending on your outcome, you might or might not experience certain things. And then you have the hard franchise, like, for example, Star Wars, where there is a Luke Skywalker. Well, I mean, I'm not a Star Wars fan, but I mean, even I know that there is a Luke Skywalker. And so I would assume that a Luke Skywalker, at least depending on when the Star Wars role-playing game is set, would either happen to be a contemporary character or somebody in the past or someone who is still to come. But you have... so the point is that you have something that you need to align yourself, otherwise you will be in complete conflict with the existing world, which is outside of the actual game. And of course, this is definitely true for J.R.R. Tolkien and his works. And anything you base on his works has to have a certain grounding, be it with regard to the races, be it with regard to the use of magic, which is pretty much non-existent. I mean, there is some form of magic that the elves have, but it's more like bending nature in a very soft way. You do have the wizards, but even what they do isn't necessarily magic, because they are essentially angelic beings that use some kind of force, some kind of angelic force, some kind of like heavenly force, as it were. There is some rune magic, probably, which the dwarves know about. They have magical runes that they can use. They use them on the map. So, for example, Thror's map has magical runes. The gate that the side gate that the dwarves try to get into Mount Erebor in The Hobbit is, of course, a magical gate. But you don't have flaming sphere or fulminictus or paraline, or what else do we have? Fireball. You just don't have those big spells, big magical things that you can do to change reality. It doesn't exist in the Lord of the Rings. There is some form of magic, obviously, also the idea of ring magic. That's where like the whole ring thing comes from. There is some magical element to this. I mean, somebody, a being like Sauron, being able to pour all his malice, all his strength and power into an artifact, which is then separate from his body. It's in his ring, and as soon as he loses the ring, he loses his power. I mean, that's magic in a way. I mean, I can't put my will into this ring. I also don't want to, but I mean, it's not like I could take my personality, put it into this ring, and then separate it from my body. So there is something that one could consider to be magical, whatever that is. Of course, you also have the world itself. The world has a particular shape. The world has a succession, and a very detailed succession of ages, of things that happen through these ages, important things like the Fell Winter, which had a big impact on Eriador, or of course the fact that there were two hobbits who made it to Mount Doom and dropped in the ring. I mean, you can't have a game set in the world of Tolkien where this doesn't happen. You can't have a game set in the world of Tolkien where Bilbo does not find the ring, and where it isn't passed on to Frodo, and where Frodo doesn't take the ring to Mordor. It doesn't work. It has to happen. You can't have a world where Aragorn doesn't become king. You can't have a world where Galadriel never made it back from the Undying Lands into Middle-earth. It just doesn't work, because then the whole story would not be there, and the whole world would literally look different. If Celeborn and Galadriel hadn't gone to Lorien and had created Lothlorien, the whole face of Middle-earth and its history would be totally different. So within these confines of the story, you have to build your role-playing game. So you as an author are beholden to this very strong franchise and to this already pre-existing and very, very detailed world. Which, of course, is a challenge because there is very little you can, for example, do with regard to races. You have the elves, you have the dwarves, you've got men. You don't have in this you can't play orcs because they're simply evil. You can't play Nazgul, unlike in the Middle-earth CCG where you can play a Balrog, where you can play a Nazgul, where you can play a fallen wizard. Here you can't. You also can't play a wizard, by the way. You're just a normal being, You are heroic because you start to adventure, but you're very limited in your heroism, also because it is a world that is essentially non-magical. So you can be a little stronger than maybe your peers because, you're favored by nature. You're a little taller, you have more muscles, you can run a little more quickly. But you are, at the end of the day, fully human or fully an elf or fully a dwarf. That is what you are. You are no different from them. So that is something that a lot of people will not like about this game, because the world of Tolkien is pretty much the world of medieval chivalry, where you have some very, very elevated people because they are special, they have a special bloodline, they may be royalty or nobility, like the stewards of Gondor. They are just special because they inherited the title, but they have to live up to the title. And we know that Denethor was a really, really good steward until he lost his mind, and he lost his mind looking into the Palantir, and also the death of his wife didn't help. So he more and more became part of the shadow, but he was a very, very noble person when he set out. And of course, both his sons, Faramir and Boromir, need to live up to the line of stewards, and they are both noble men. Boromir has a lapse, but he recovers in the end. And maybe, just maybe, the lapse was important because that led to the split of the Fellowship, and God knows what would have happened if they hadn't split up. So it could well be that this is all part and parcel of Ilúvatar's design, and Ilúvatar is the supreme deity in Middle-earth. Okay, so having said all this, there's also another obstacle. First of all, it's you're going to play in a mundane world where you have to walk for hours, for days on end. If you're very lucky, you may have a horse, but most people can't even afford this. You are in a rural society, and life is essentially hard. So it doesn't get more mundane than, I think, the One Ring when it comes to heroic adventuring. Second problem, and this is more probably a problem in the 21st century or late 20th century, there are very few women in Tolkien. And we can speculate and discuss the reasons for this for hours on end, and even when people say, yeah, but he does have these strong women, what about Éowyn and what about Galadriel? Well, first of all, Galadriel, when you look at different iterations of her character, she wasn't always a strong woman. And Éowyn, she has her one big moment. I'm no man, and that's it. She is, and then she basically goes off and marries Faramir and decides to just, stay put. Yeah, well, she had her one big moment, and that was it. So, and that's all there is. We have a very few women who are mentioned. And for those of you who only know Tolkien through the films, Arwen isn't like that. Arwen is not an unimportant character by any means, but she's not really in the book at all. She's mentioned once where she attends a banquet. That's all you read about her. She does appear in the appendices. She's not the person to rescue Frodo. That is Glorfindel. She is... there is no Arwen in The Lord of the Rings. Forget about it. She doesn't say, if you want him, come and claim him, which is, of course, what Leonidas said at Thermopylae, monon labe, come and get them, when the Persians demanded the Spartans put down their weapons. But it's not like that in the book. And they base their game on the book. They don't base it on the films, which is very important to notice. So they had to find their way around it. So they basically said, yes, in all societies, women can do stuff. And women are just like men. There is no difference. So you kind of have to get over this one. So if you're talking purist, there are plenty of women in this. So they did make an effort. They moved away from the storyline, which I'm fine with. Then you have to think about what the ultimate subtext of especially the Lord of the Rings really is. And I think it's friendship, loyalty, the willingness to take risks that seem to be insurmountable. You know, where you're just the smallest person, and here I'm talking literally about the hobbits, the smallest of them all. They're even smaller than dwarves, and they alter the course of history. That it is normal people who may not even have wanted to venture forth. And I mean, Galadriel, for example, is not a normal woman. She's not even a normal elf. She's elf nobility. She saw the trees. So she is very special even amongst her own peoples. The different, she's a Noldor, so she's even different among the different elves and elf types. Then of course you've got Aragorn. He's not a normal guy. I mean, he descended directly from Isildur. He is a Númenórean. They're not normal people, you know. Normal people in the Lord of the Rings are all of the hobbits. Éowyn isn't a normal person. She's the niece of the king. Éomer isn't a normal person. He's a brother. He's the nephew of the king. Theoden isn't a normal person. He's the king. Boromir, Faramir, they're not normal people. They are nobility. But it is really the mundane ones who win out. It is the Sam Gamgees of this world. It is the Frodo Bagginses of this world. It is Lobelia Sackville Baggins, who basically is a bitch. But she is the one who really resists at the scouring of the Shire. She is not going to take this lying down. She's imprisoned, you know, but she's just a normal, everyday, well, probably not an everyday hobbit woman, but she is a normal hobbit woman, you know. And this is what they're trying to recreate. It's this, you're a hero, you feel that you want to go adventuring, which is also what Bilbo wants. He wants to go adventuring. So that's the motivation. You want to go adventuring. And then suddenly the road goes ever on and on. It unfolds and suddenly these things happen. But you're also aware that not everything is fine. So this is why they decided to set the story 5 years after the Battle of the Five Armies. And that is about 60 years, 55 years out from the ring, from the War of the Ring, which happens about 60 years later, I think. So he was 50 when he went. He was 111, 61. No, sorry, I lied. It's probably 78 years, 73 years. Or how old was Bilbo when he left? I think he was 50. Yeah, so then it would be 61 years. And then another 17, so 78 years before the War of the Ring. So it's a long span of watchful peace. You know, after the Battle of the Five Armies, they describe in the role-playing game how, you know, like life is better, the threat in Mirkwood has been ousted, there is trade again, the dwarves have been re-established in Erebor, Lake Town and Esgaroth. Lake Town and Dale. Esgaroth and Lake Town are the same thing. Lake Town and Dale are prospering again. Thranduil has kind of calmed down. The Misty Mountains are no longer swarming with orcs and goblins. And it's getting better. But of course, Eriador is still depopulated. You know, they never really recovered from the fall of the kings of Arthedain. So, but you know, it is getting better. But then, of course, the shadow comes back, because we all know that the Witch King of, you know, we have Dol Guldur in Mirkwood is getting restless again, you know, and there is evil coming there again and again. And this is basically how they spin it. So after 5 years, suddenly, you know, things are slowly, you know, people are getting happier, people feel a lot more secure. The Beornings and the Woodman Beorn and the Woodman have basically decided to keep everything safe between Mirkwood and the Misty Mountains. So they are basically establishing a little bit of a, I don't want to call it kingdom, but area. And of course we've got Radagast in Roscommon, who's also keeping an eye out. So life is good, although it's of course frugal for the average hobbit, for the average woodman, and you know, why would you go adventuring? Well, you know, and there's a lot of reasons why you would in the book. They explain them very, very well. And then danger does not die. There is still evil going on, because Sauron, at this stage, Sauron hasn't declared himself. Nobody knows that he's still alive. There is the Dol Guldur stuff, you know, there's the Witch King and everything, but, you know, this is now all about how the shadow is slowly creeping back. And this is the story of the One Ring role-playing game. Mechanically speaking, you build a hero and you get to choose. You don't roll dice when you create a hero. You decide on a race. You just then decide on a class, as it were. There isn't that much variety in the One Ring basic game. So I think you get maybe 3, 4 or 5 classes. You can be a hobbit. You can be a Mirkwood elf. You can be a woodman, which is kind of like a Beorning. And it is described how you build a character. You have different traits. Some of which are favored because they are your class skills. You're very good at those, and others are you're not as good in. Some things you can't do at all. And you have 3 main attributes: heart, wits, and mind, I want to say. Let's just take a look. Body, heart, and wits. And, you know, this is actually a character sheet, and you can see there is, it's actually an economical one. So this is a real character that they created. Her name is the Bride, and she's one of the culture of the Woodmen of Wilderland. She's actually female. Her standard of living is frugal. You know, these are all things that you decide at the beginning. And then you have your hero. And you can play this with 1 hero and 1 storyteller. You don't need a big party. You could play this with 1 person. I mean, you would have to adapt all of the stuff because, you know, even for a party of 4, a troll can be a deadly enemy. And if you're just the 1 person, it might be quite difficult. But, you know, it's, if you've ever created a character in a different game, a lot of this will not be in any way surprising. So how does the game actually try to show Tolkien's world? Well, there are different phases in the game, and they are quite different, I would say, from other games that I'm familiar with. Think about it. You have your 2 feet, and if you want to go anywhere, and this here is just basically Wilderland, because the basic set, so the basic book starts out in Dale. So basically you're kind of like, you know, everything is coming up roses, people are feeling better again, Smaug is gone. So you start here. This is what the base set of the rules provides you with. Races that come from this area, and you start adventuring in this area. It's all about, in the first instance, it's all about traveling. It's about traversing this huge landmass. And this is only part of the land of Middle-earth, because this is the Misty Mountains. So, you know, the Shire is that away. And you do this on your Shanks mare. You don't have horses. You may have a couple of boats when you're in Dale, but that's it. So this idea of actually traveling, of traversing, is a separate phase in the game. Everyone has a different role. You have the hunter, you have the lookout, you have the guide, and I think there may be a fourth one. And they have to basically ensure that the company doesn't go astray and doesn't go hungry. Then you have, of course, encounters. And encounters, and here I would like to draw your attention to a video by Geek Gamers where she talks about social encounters. And I think she uses an example, I want to say from Jane Austen. I believe she has a book by Jane Austen as an example. It's interaction, and it's personal interaction. And that's very interesting as well, because the way they do it, they say, as you go in to an interaction, you have, and of course, everything, like in many role-playing games, you have the role-playing aspect, how well do you do things, but you also have the role-playing aspect where you roll dice. In this game, you have a d12, which is the feat die. They actually have custom-made ones where the 12 is an automatic success, the 11 is Sauron's eye, it's an automatic failure. And then you have d6s, and a 6, when you roll a natural 6, that's actually an excellent, I think, if you meet the target number, you have a success. If you have a 6 on this one, you have an excellent success, and then you can also have a super excellent or extreme success. I would have to check what they call them, but you have different levels of success as well, quality levels, we could call them. But when you have an encounter, depending on, who you are, what your social standing is, and you actually have standing, and this can be improved and disimproved over time. What your race is, not your gender, but your race, because we all know that dwarves and elves have a checkered history. The person you're meeting will have a different way of looking at you depending on who he is facing. And if you're meeting a king, or if you, there are kings. So for example, Bard is a king. If you meet somebody who puts a lot of emphasis on military prowess, and if you come there and kind of go, oh, well, I'm the lady's minstrel, he will find you less interesting than if you come in as a kind of like a warrior and say, well, actually, I'm here to fight on your behalf or for you or work with you or whatnot. So all of these affect how the die pool will look, and how the difficulty of the encounter will be. So they kind of use this social element, which I really like. And then, of course, it's not all about rolling only. It's also about role-playing, about how do you actually start a conversation. You can start by inspiring somebody. If you meet a group of people, you could try and use awe to wow them, I guess. Or you could just simply start by introducing yourself, And depending on how this goes and how many also successes you roll during an interaction, the interaction goes in different ways. And I also have a chapter, or even like a box, a sidebar on how much of this should be decided by dice and how much should be decided by role-playing. Because of course, this is a role-playing game, and they kind of say, well, there is no one rule of thumb or one way of telling you how this should work, but you should try and have both. And it also, I guess, depends on the party you're playing with. So we have the travel phase, which is really important, and which also can take, several roles. And, it's also about describing the landscape. So they're very Tolkien-esque. And I will talk about the supplements maybe today or maybe in a different video. It's about how you evoke nature in your storytelling. You have encounters, you have combat, which is a little bit complex because you can take different stances and you can call shots, but I'm not going to go into a discussion of this, because let's just say it's not just, oh, look, there's an orc, I'm going to run towards him and swing my axe and I'm going to roll a d20. It's not like that. It reads quite involved, but then again, since I've never played it, I think it also depends. Once you know your stats, once you know your character, once you know the combat system, it probably isn't more complicated than most, but it is something that's different from your normal roll to hit. And then you have the fellowship phase, and this is very important because they basically don't rush you through adventure after adventure after adventure. The idea is that you have one adventure, and this will take you a year to complete, including everything, including the fellowship phase. Now, in the fellowship phase, you can do different things. You can go to a haven, and at the moment of writing, I think this is in the base game, I think you only have a sanctuary. Esgaroth is the only one that's available to you at the outset. As you travel and as you see different places, this is very important. As you travel, as your party travels, they actually have to go to a place. Like, for example, they could discover Rivendell, because not everybody knows that Rivendell actually exists. I mean, it's if you remember the book and the film, it's more clear in the book actually. Boromir had heard a rumor. There was a rumor in Minas Tirith that Rivendell existed, and where it was, kind of. He had to go and look for it. It wasn't common knowledge, you know. So they have to discover Rivendell, and then they can work on making it into a sanctuary, which is also something you can do during a fellowship phase. You can also break up the party and everybody goes to their home places to be with their families, to get some respite. Because, and this is where the next part comes in, and this is, in my opinion, brilliantly done. It's let's put it this way, it's brilliantly conceived, and I think the implementation is really good. You have hope that you can make a difference, and you have shadow points, and they are given to you as the story progresses, and either as you do bad things or as bad things happen. And they're a little bit like, you know, you want to get rid of them. And you also want to rebuild your hope. So you can do this in different ways. I'm not going to go through these because I can't even remember all of them, because there is, you know, like the rules are very, very, I don't want to say complex, but there's simply a lot. But you can gain shadow through various things. You can also gain, and this is where you can definitely see something harking back to the MECCG, you have to take corruption tests. And what can corrupt you is, for example, finding treasure. But also, and I don't know if I can show you a card. Yeah, this is a map that shows this. This is the map that the storyteller uses of Wilderland. So you've got, this is Mirkwood essentially. This is where the Beornings live. And Lake Thames over here. And these differently shaded pieces of the map tell you how dangerous this place is. And if it is more dangerous, it can corrupt you. And you have to roll for this. And I like this idea, the fact that you're traveling through bleak land, you know, land that has been emptied of people, land that is dangerous, land that is almost like so evil still. You know, how evil seeps into the earth, that it actually then comes out again and brings you down. I think this is really, we're just going to look at sources of corruption on page 222, and here it says, adventurers accumulate shadow points to represent the growing burden of grief, doubt, weariness, and self-interest that comes to rest on the hearts and minds of those who oppose the shadow. While much corruption can be attributed to the anguish caused by the Dark Lord's deeds, the shadow can only work to exaggerate and nurture weaknesses that are already present. So everyone has a flaw. And the more you fall to the shadows, the more pronounced it becomes. As the twilight of the Third Age approaches, the sources of corruption multiply and increase in severity. Heroes mainly risk gaining shadow points in 4 ways. Experience in distressing events, see anguish. So, natural but unexpected tragic events or very grievous occurrences. Crossing or dwelling in an area tainted by manifestations of the shadow, blighted places. So, for example, the Darklands, the Shadowlands, the Wildlands, and the Freelands, and the Borderlands. Depending on, you need to roll. Let's say if you live in a Shadowland or if you travel through Shadowlands, you have to roll the feat die once a day, and on a 12. You basically gain corruption. So you make a corruption check. Then, of course, also very interesting, committing despicable or dishonorable deeds, regardless of the end they sought to achieve. And here we have anything from accidental misdeed, where you are not gaining a shadow, to torment and torture and murder, where you gain 5 points. Or taking possession of a cursed or tainted item or treasure, and that's very much like the MECCG, where most of the items you get actually can corrupt you, and you have to take corruption checks. So they're really taking this seriously. But of course you gain shadow points, and in the beginning they are usually temporary, but you have to regain your composure, you have to regain your equilibrium, and you can do this in various ways, but one of them is of course to repair to your own home place, be with your family, do things that take your mind off things, follow a hobby, for example. Sing if you're a musician, spend time in your smithy if you're a dwarf, you know, these kinds of things. And this is what you do in the fellowship phase, amongst other things. You can also help others, you know, there are different ideas and different things you can do, and I really like that. And you also can't adventure forever, because the idea is that after a while you will just return to your people and you will just be part of your community. So you also have to start thinking of who's going to take over from me, or if you die a death, who's going to inherit your stuff. And people can inherit your experience. Actually, you don't lose your character, you retire your character, or the character might die, but not everything is lost, which is also what I like. So to my mind, they have nailed a lot of things that are central to the Lord of the Rings book. They have made a unique contribution, I believe, to the world of role-playing games. But they have, I think, role-playing in and of itself is a niche. They've created a niche within a niche. Because most people will not play this, I have to say. Because it is very unspectacular. It is a very slow burn. It is confined to a certain degree because it is set in this world. But if this is your thing, and I think you have to like Tolkien, and I think you have to not necessarily come to Tolkien through the films, and especially not The Hobbit, but also The Return of the King, because they are very, very much action films. I'm not saying that there isn't action in Tolkien's books, but that's not the main topic. The main topic of Tolkien's books is the struggle within. It's a struggle within Aragorn to meet his fate, to embrace his future, to embrace his heritage. It's the internal struggle of Frodo to give up the ring, which he then, as we all know, doesn't do in the end. He does not throw the ring in. It's the internal struggle within Sam Gamgee to help his master and to become all he can be, because he's like this grey mouse in the beginning, and then he turns out to be this unlikely hero. And of course the other two hobbits, Merry and Pippin, go through the same things as well. It is all about becoming someone. And this is what, and also of course traveling. We all know that for Tolkien it is very important, the landscape and the passage of time, and how the landscape changes, and how it changes for eons and ages, and how the elves, for example, also view the changing of the landscape and how it affects them. I also read the other day in a book by Christopher Tolkien that it seems like time only started to count when the human race was born. And up until then, counting of time didn't really happen in Middle-earth. Time just was, or maybe wasn't. You know, maybe it was timeless. And this is all very important, and this is what this game is about. And if I can move my little kitten, well, he's not a little kitten, actually, he's a big cat. Ooh. I would like to show you a couple of the supplements. There are more, and I have one more that's in the mail. The other ones are all about Rohan, and I'm not interested. Now, the supplements are kind of, I would say, of two kinds. Brie is the one that I'm reading at the moment, and I'm in total love with it because I always liked the journey of the hobbits up until they reach, I would say up until they meet the ring wraiths at the fort the best. I'm not a fan of the elves. But I always loved, even better than anything else, the journey through the Shire and through the Barrow Downs. And I always liked, and I'm one of the few people probably who really likes Tom Bombadil, because he makes so much sense if you understand The Lord of the Rings and if you understand the stories that Tolkien was trying to tell. So anyway, and I was always wondering about Bree, because Bree has a couple of surrounding little villages, Archet, Chetwood and Staddle. And they are mentioned, and there's even a map where they are shown, but nobody really talks about them. You know, they're just there. They're mentioned. We know who lives there. Well, you know, like there's little people and there's big people, but that's all there is. And I was always like, well, I wish they had gone to Archet. I wish we knew more about these places. I wish we knew more about what happens in the Chetwood. And I wish I knew more about Bree and Breeland and what goes on there, because it's actually quite huge. Breeland in and of itself isn't that big, but this is Breeland here. This is the beginning of the Shire, and here you've got the Chetwood, and all of this is Eriador. When you go north, if you follow the Greenway north, this is what a lot of people don't understand. This was a kingdom once. It's the kingdom of Arthedain. If you keep going, you will get to Fornost, or Norbury, or also known as Deadman's Dyke. That was a place where kings lived a long, long time ago. And I always wanted to go there, and I always wanted to know what's going on there. And I always thought, you know, this has been empty for thousands of years. Surely there must be something going on there. Well, there is, and it's in this book. And it's also in this book. These two, so basically Bree also introduces a new race, the Breelanders, that you can play, and it also contains 3 adventures which you can play consecutively, and they are brilliant. They are so brilliant. There's one that's like a little detective story where you have to find out who killed someone, and the way they do it, brilliantly done. This was actually written by someone I know knows. I mean, this is Ireland, everybody knows everybody. This was written by Mr. Gareth Ryder Hanrahan. He's an excellent writer. He writes, and he's actually got a novel coming out. So if you ever play any RPGs and you see a supplement written by this guy, you are supposed to get it, because he's a brilliant writer and he's nailed it. I mean, this is brilliant. Ruins of the North takes it even further. So you are actually exploring the north, eastern Eriador. So Angmar up here, Carn Doom, Lone Lands, South Downs. You have Rivendell over here. You've got Bree over here. So you're basically adventuring in this area. It is amazing. I mean, the fact that they did this makes me personally totally happy. Again, you have a series of adventures which are actually spelled out for you. So you can run these. You would have to do some preparation, of course, but they are actually detailed out for you. Then you've got The Darkening of Mirkwood, which is, of course, set in Mirkwood, but that's different. That is actually a tale of years. So how this works is they have all of these years, and this is, of course, completely in accordance with the works of Tolkien, so all of this works well if you were to compare it with the Tale of Years from the appendices. And they basically tell you stories of what happens in each year. But you have to build your own adventures. You cannot use this book and just say, okay, so for example, this year is year 2970 of the Third Age. Adventuring phase, slaying the forest dragon, hunting the forest dragon. So it is really, it's an adventure on like 3 pages, less than that, 2 pages. It's a bare bones thing. This is something for a role-playing game master who's willing to put in the work. But of course, the stories that are told are brilliant. Rivendell I haven't even looked at, but it is, I don't think it contains any adventures, does it? No. It is actually telling you about the history of Eriador, Eregion. It also introduces something else, and that is eye awareness and the hunt. And this is obviously something, if you've ever played The War of the Rings, you do have probably some idea. It's this idea that the shadow becomes more aware of the heroes of your party as you go through your adventuring phase. You know, people start to see you. You know, the shadow has many eyes and has many, you know, like agents, as it were, and they suddenly start to see you and they become suspicious. And one that I still have in the mail coming. It's a damaged item because I got it cheaper for only £16. Is the Wilderlands, Tales from the Wilderlands, and I'm really looking forward to this. And then I've got all of the books that I want, because I'm not so interested in like the heroic cultures of the East. There's a ton of fan-made stuff out there as well. Now, the downside of all of this is that I will never play this game because I have no one to play it with. Because it's just not the kind of game that my group would enjoy. For various reasons. For some of them, it's too devoid of magic. For others, this idea that you know, like have to retire your character, or, you know, your character essentially doesn't go on forever, is a downer, which I don't really understand, because we've never really played so long that, you know, the character would ever retire in our games, because, you know, we just play one game and then, you know, or one campaign. I mean, we played Strahd, I guess, and that took us months. But, you know, in game time, it's less than 5 weeks. So, you know, we wouldn't have aged a lot. But of course, this does take into account the passing of the years, because again, you are tied to events in the real world and you have to keep pace with them. So, you know, time passes, and the passage of time is just as important as it is in the Dark Eye. So I will never be playing this game, which I'm really sad about. I would even volunteer to run it. I'm not even saying, yes, I want to play this game, but only if somebody else runs it. I would be happy to sit down and GM this, because it is an awesome game. Mechanically speaking, I don't think it's very innovative, or there's anything in there that is in any way wow, except of course you have the shadow and you have the hope components, and how they are trying to express Tolkien's ideas in mechanical ways is impressive. But I wouldn't say now this is like completely different from other games. Mechanically speaking, I mean, even the dice, you have D6s and D12s. However, as I was preparing for this video, I was thinking more and more about, and you all know that I really enjoy Geek Gamer's channel, and she does a lot about playing role-playing games solo and how to do this. And she has plenty of videos for the solo GM/player. And I'm beginning to think that I could possibly play this game solo. I think it has enough meat for me to make this work. I will have to think about it, and at the moment I'm definitely not going to do anything because term has started. I'm back at uni and of course working full-time, so I simply don't have the time to engage with this. And also I'm planning on running a campaign for the Dark Eye, and since I have players to play with and I need to be prepared because I want them to have a really good experience, because I want them to stick with the system and I want them to stick with Aventuria, not all the time. I'm not saying that we should now play this exclusively, but I want them to stick with it and I want them to like it. I have to put a lot of work into that one. But come Christmas, I've got 3 weeks off, and maybe I will maybe make 2 characters, 2 very different ones, so that I can have, you know, like a choice when we're interacting or when we're fighting, so that we have enough stuff going on there. And then maybe try and play something. Yeah, but like I said, it's a great game. The books are actually so that you can buy them and read them and enjoy them, even if you're not going to play. I think they're just brilliant. And the art is, I mean, they were like, oh, it's John Howe and blah, blah, blah. And I think he may be responsible for some of the artwork, but some of the artwork is not very impressive. So the art is okay, but I don't know, I was less impressed with the art for some reason, but you know, it's good. It's good. It's not bad, but it's not like it didn't wow me. So I recommend this. And I hope that some people will pick this up and maybe decide, oh wow, this is something that I would like to play. And then I wish them luck finding the right group for it. But like I said, if you are into Tolkien, I would even recommend it just for the storytelling that is in the books. And especially I would say, if you are interested in storytelling or learning, or kind of like dreaming yourself into Middle Earth beyond Tolkien's own writings, I would recommend Bree, and I would recommend The Ruins of the North for reading. And that's all from me tonight, and I wish you all a pleasant rest of the day. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.